making movies is hard.
Making movies is hard.
Welcome. This is the podcast about the struggle of being an independent filmmaker. I'm Ulrich Wissell, the founding host of the podcast, and I'm a sci-fi horror filmmaker. And my first feature film, The Alternate, is playing the festival circuit right now. I don't think it's playing anywhere next weekend. What is next weekend? Yeah, it is. I'm going to be in Italy next weekend for the movie. It's playing November 6th in Ravenna. I'm going to be there in person. And it's also playing that same weekend in Germany, in Berlin, where I won't be. But it's playing 2 different countries, same day, in person. It's also going to be online in both those countries too. So if you're in Germany or if you're in Italy and you want to watch the movie, you can find it online.
What's the name of the movie, Ulrich?
Did I not say? My movie, The Alternate. Check out The Alternate if you're in Italy or you're in Germany the weekend of November 5th, because it'll be playing in your country.
I'm Liz Manischel. I'm a writer, director, producer. I've made 2 features and I'm currently in development in about 5 more. I'm a distribution consultant who was the manager of Sundance's Creative Distribution Initiative. This week, we welcome filmmaker and actor, one of my favorite humans, Christine Weatherup, to talk about her first feature film, See You Next Christmas, which she shot in her own apartment just weeks before the pandemic started. Chrissy, as we like to call her, she talks about how she came up with the story, her relationship between acting and directing, and how she approached fundraising and the production of the film. After we have our interview with Chrissy, we talk about the tragedy in New Mexico and the set of rest, and we also answer a listener question. Before we get into all that, Ulrich, what's up? How you doing?
I'm okay. I was a little depressed and saddened, heavily saddened, obviously, about the whole tragedy on the set of Rust. And I've been thinking about it, as everyone in our industry has, and reading about it and following it. Outside of that, The Alternate is still consuming my life, which is great. We're basically decided who we're going to go with for our distributor. I don't want to say yet because It's not official, but we, gone back and forth, and we've got a really, really good vibe from this company and this person. They seem like super down to earth and trustworthy and not pulling any shenanigans. So yeah, we'll never know until we start getting checks or not getting checks, but hopefully it goes well. Yeah, it was week 2 of paternity leave for me. So I'm just spending all my time with my daughter. So it's just really been magical to, hang out with her all day and just get a lot of bonding time. And, seeing her grow every day is amazing. She changes constantly, and she's almost 4 months and she's just doing new things every day. So it's pretty awesome. But how about you? How are you doing, Liz?
It's been a weird, slow week for me after weeks and weeks of just being a really high anxiety, extreme intensity, Liz. As soon as we finished our shoot 2 weeks ago, it's been really calm over here. So I'm building up. I'm having a lot more calls with clients, doing sales and distribution consulting, and then going in to see the assembly of my short film a week from tomorrow. So I get to see it in a week, which is very exciting for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But nothing really dramatic. I feel like, just like you, I have been obsessed with everything that happened on this set of Rust and have just been Googling and just kind of escaping into the news the past few days.
Yeah, so we're going to skip our Patreon this week. So if you were thinking about supporting us, you should go over to Helena Hutchins' GoFundMe at GoFundMe/raise funds in memory of Helena Hutchins, and give what you can. They already are way over their goal, but I feel I'm sure every penny helps. So if you can just do what you can. And also check out the International Screenwriters Association, the ISA. It's an organization designed to connect writers with filmmakers through a number of programs they offer, including publishing your logline to a network of industry professionals, consultation courses, contests, and a top 25 writers list featuring some of their best writers. So head over to www.networkisa.org to sign up for free today. But you can also get one of their special ISA Connect yearly memberships for $80, which is normally $100, by using our promo code MMIH 2021, which is valid through November 30th. And you can only do it if you've never been an ISA Connect member. So first timers only, people.
Yeah. So thank you for supporting Helena. Thank you for supporting ISA. And without any more delay, here's our chat with Chrissy Weatherup. We're here with Christine Weatherup to talk about her first feature, See You Next Christmas. Chrissy, can you give us the elevator pitch, please?
Oh, the elevator pitch. Well, it's a romantic comedy set during the holiday season over the course of 6 years at the same annual holiday party. And you have this couple who throws the party and then a couple who attends, who keeps meeting each other. And it's sort of a will they or won't they story, as well as an ensemble, a fun ensemble as you see them grow over the years.
How many days did you shoot?
16.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was the rough budget?
Oh, you're really coming in with the hard questions. But you could actually look on WeFunder. Basically, it's a SAG ultra low budget. And on we raised through WeFunder, which I don't know if we'll end up talking about. But if not, you could always hit me up. I talk about WeFunder all the time. And we raised just under $140K on WeFunder.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you come up? Did I ask the last? This is where I am.
I think it's my turn.
This is where my mind is.
Well, as Liz actually knows, I throw my own annual Christmas party called Chrissymas. And so that was the rough inspiration. I had another feature I was pushing forward towards that I had sort of thought would be my first feature. But then after moving through financing and fundraising and getting really close to making it and it falling apart a number of times, I asked myself, what's a movie I could make within my means now and not wait? And so, we had The Apartment that was our set. It was a story that I had thought about writing for a long time. And I was like, this is just a much more attainable part of the challenge of the other film was that there were 1 million locations. This had 2. Yeah, that was sort of the impetus.
How long?
And I love rom-coms
because they're the best.
Yeah.
How long did you spend working on the film from inception? You coming up with the idea until now its release?
Yeah. So let's see, hold on. Let me do my math. In the fall of 2018 is when I had hit a really big roadblock with the other film. And so I told myself that I'd give myself to the end of the year to write that script. It was probably like September 2018. Write a draft of that script while I also tried to reconfigure the budget of the other one. And so ironically, the film used to be called What Are You Doing New Year's? And I gave myself to New Year's Eve to finish it. And I literally was in a coffee shop, brew in our neighborhood on New Year's Eve, finishing, getting to Fade to Black in 2018. Then we spent 2019 workshopping it, where I hosted a table read with some actor friends, brought it to Sandbox, which I don't know if Liz, you've talked about Sandbox on the podcast. It's
not yet.
A group that Liz has been a part of. So I don't know why you haven't talked about it. Brought it to Sandbox where you could workshop the scenes with other directors and actors that you bring in. And then by the end of 2018, we had explored some financing options before moving to WeFunder, launched a WeFunder at the end of 2019. And we were shooting February 2020, weeks before the country shut down, and then edited it all through COVID. And it's coming out November 9th of this year, 2021.
And then compared to all the other projects you made, how difficult was this one?
Whenever you're in the project, it feels like it's the most difficult. I feel like every part of the process, whether I'm in pre-production, post, I'm on set, I'm always like, oh, this is the hardest. I can't wait till we get to the next thing. And then you get to the next thing and you're like, oh, I wish we were back in production. That was easy. I would say for as many challenges and surprises along the way, like, the pandemic being one of the major surprises, unpredictable. I feel like I had such a strong team that even when we hit those challenges, it didn't, maybe it's also in hindsight in the moment, I maybe didn't feel all of this, but I think it never felt insurmountable. It was challenging and there were long days. And actually, Ulrich, at the same time that we were shooting, I believe you were shooting, or it was very, very similar. Right. Timelines. And I remember that you had done sort of audio diaries. And so I did in my car, I did like I have not, I'm not as brave as you to share them with anyone, but I do have daily sort of video journals. So when I've looked back at a few of those, there were some dark days.
Yeah, no, the logs are fun because it like helped put it all in perspective later. But yeah, I remember because I had shot right before you guys. So you were shooting right after. And I was hearing about your shoot from Matt and just, following along on the podcast. And I was like, man, I should have done that. 3 days on, 4 days off or whatever. Like, that sounds awesome. Oh man, what a great idea.
But we also lived on our set. So that wasn't a great idea. So like literally, and I was we recently moved actually, but we were in a 1-bedroom apartment. And so our video village would generally be in our bedroom, which meant that we would put our bed on its side so that we could put a video village in. So like you kind of needed that break for more reasons than, yeah.
Do you feel like that was really helpful, or was that only because you were living on your set? Or do you think you would do that again? Like, what were some of the benefits of having that kind of schedule?
There were huge benefits. I mean, part of it came out of one original plan. As with filmmaking, you come up with a plan and then you have a B plan, a C plan, a D plan. You have so many versions. And there was a version of this film in early 2019 where I thought it would be sort of like a mini Boyhood, where we would shoot a weekend a month for 6 months because it's over 6 years. And then an actor gets a haircut, like things happen, they change a little, like there would be something really fun about it. Although the practicality of getting, just even actors to commit to a 6 month, once a weekend thing felt like maybe a bad idea or just a challenge, let alone crew members. But, I would definitely do it again. We were lucky also because we shot the film basically chronologically. And so I think from an actor's perspective, that, was a real gift. But it also, people got to know each other more over the course of making the film. And so I think that kind of shows in the end product. And because we would have a set for 1 year and a set for another year, we'd have days to turn it over, and so that was kind of a nice luxury. And just the break. I mean, I thought it might be more appealing to crew in the way that, you can take a bigger money gig during the week and then do the passion project on the weekend. But I don't know if ultimately, I'd have to ask crew members, but I don't know if ultimately that was as big of a asset as I thought it might be. But man, if you could do it that way, having that break is really nice because it gives you time to reevaluate. And I mean, filmmaking is hard. Making movies is hard, I've heard.
Well,
and so having that break is nice.
Okay. Ulrich, you and I know Chrissy, but people listening to this may not know anything about Chrissy. They should know everything about Chrissy, but can you talk about yourself for a second, Chrissy, to just bring people context? This is your first feature, but also you're a writer, but also you're an actress. Do you want to bring people into your world in the way only you can?
Oh, no pressure. Well, my background is as an actor. I grew up in Los Angeles, always wanted to be a part of film, even though my family had nothing to do with it and probably were very scared when I showed that interest. But I started acting as a teenager after wearing them down and begging to take classes, and have been acting professionally since. And I've appeared in things like recently Watchmen. I had a really fun guest star on that. And then the indie feature, the indie darling, Bread and Butter, you might know. I mean, that was my first huge, like a leading role carrying a film like that. I mean, I talk about it a lot, Liz, not just when I'm on your podcast. So sweet. But yeah, and I always grew up knowing that I wanted to be on both sides of the camera. As a child, Jodie Foster was my idol. I love her as an actor, and just finding out that she also was on the other side of the camera was fascinating to me at a time where I didn't really see women behind the camera. And so I went to USC Film School. That's actually where I met Matt. And then, I was writing on the side and kind of waiting for that to sort of, I don't know, happen without me doing anything. I was like, I'll keep acting. And then somehow this writing or directing will somebody will offer me a project, but that, doesn't happen. And so eventually, it hit me that I needed to make something, and what was I waiting for? And so I made a short that went around at festivals. And then from there, I had this other feature script that I was really pushing forward. But this is the feature directorial debut.
Thank you.
What was the genre of your short?
And I suppose this is something you probably talk about. I haven't had a strategy in terms of the sort of what I'm putting myself out there as an auteur. I think I chase whatever interests me. And so the short is period sort of melodrama. It's a post-World War II. It follows a widowed housewife meeting a soldier who served with her husband. Very different from this holiday rom-com, and very different from the other feature that's like a San Francisco murder mystery, female-driven. None of them are at all similar. So yes.
I also want to ask another personal question, as I tend to do. When I first got to know you, I didn't know you wanted to write and direct. And I always thought that you had this kind of like power couple complementary system with Matt, where he was the writer director and you were this actress and you were the muse and he was the, the director. And then as I got to know you, I saw him produce your work, you act in his work. There's a really way more of a symbiotic ecosystem going on there than meets the eye. And I just wanted to ask the very, tiny, easy to answer question of how does it work having that kind of creative partnership where you both want to direct and you both want to write? And do you take turns and how do you support each other in that capacity?
That's a great question. I think it's somehow I don't think there's like a taking turns that's cognitive that we do, although it is something that I think we have to be mindful of, because one project, a feature takes a long time versus a short. And I think having a partner who is also in the arts has been such a gift, but it also, there are highs and lows in this industry. And usually we're kind of on different curves. So when he's at a high, I might be at a low, and it doesn't, but sometimes you hit them at the same time and that can be a challenge. But I think, ultimately, and he produced this film. And I think the beauty of it, as a director, I'm sure you both relate, nobody's going to care about your project as much as you do. You have to be the person who's constantly moving it forward, who you hit a wall and you get back up, and you get people inspired to join you to get back up. And, if there's anyone who cares close to as much as I do, it's him. And so to have that partnership has been, such a gift, I think, for both of us. I hope he feels the same way with his projects that I work on. Did I answer the question at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you set me up for a follow-up question. So I know a lot of, filmmakers and directors and people who produce and direct, but Matt's the only other director I know besides myself who's produced a feature for someone else. So how was it convincing him to do that? Like, was it easy? Did he want to do it? Or was it like a big ask? Can you talk about that a little bit?
If it weren't me, I do not think he would be producing it, if that answers the question. But it also was sort of I don't want to say an assumption, because it wasn't an assumption on my behalf, but I think it was also on his behalf. He and Beatrice Shaheen both produced my short. And so the three of us were kind of like, we met on probably, now I should know, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, on Matt's web series Squaresville. And B had just moved from Texas. She had graduated from UT, and she was a PA on our, who moved up to be line producer on our web series. And the three of us, had been like, oh, we should work together again. And so that's when I did the short, we lured B in. And I think B and Matt, having the two of them, they also have really complementary skills. And so I think, if B hadn't been in the picture, I think that it would have been even, a harder ask for him, because producing is such a tough job, and just, you need so many different skills to pull from and to pull it off. And so I think all three of us kind of came together in a really symbiotic way. And we had done it on a smaller scale, but the difference between a short and a feature is, vast in many ways. In some ways it's not at all, but it just, just by nature, 16 times, the short we did in one day. So to spread it over 16 days feels like a lot more.
I want to fast forward a little bit and talk about See You Next Christmas. And we interviewed these amazing filmmakers who made a film called What She Said. And they have this harrowing story of how they went into production without their full budget in front of them. And kind of these miracles happened, but miracles for them happened actually a little late in the game. And it was anyway, people could listen to the episode if they haven't. But you also were actively running a crowdfunding campaign while you were shooting. And it sounds like you were instinctually trying to get this film out sooner rather than later. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to do that?
Yeah. I think anybody who has made that choice to still be raising money while you're shooting will tell you don't do that. By the unpredictable nature of COVID and the timeline of that, I couldn't be more grateful that we did it, because there's no way we could shoot the film we shot. Even now, as restrictions have lifted somewhat, but, there's just COVID protocols, as they should be, would make it financially, I think very challenging to do a party. You know, this is a movie that's set at a party. So you have lots of people in an enclosed space. But part of the impetus for us, well, there were two things. One, we had hoped to launch our campaign sooner than we did. But, you know, when you're doing equity crowdfunding in particular, there's a lot more red tape, as there should be. And so we thought, oh, we'll launch by Halloween. And then slowly it was, well, maybe Thanksgiving. But then, you know, like you're waiting for, you know, government offices to get back to you and file paperwork. And so finally we launched in early December, but we had a ticking clock because B works in network TV and her show was going back, or maybe it was a pilot she was going to be working on. And she had to be back. I think it was by President's Day in mid-February. So literally we shot on President's Day and she was back in the office the next day. So because of that is why we did it that way. I will say an unexpected gift. Once again, I'm not recommending it, but an unexpected gift because we knew. So with WeFunder, when you raise, you have a minimum and you have your, I think you put a cap, but I don't know if you can I think you can change it, but we had a minimum. Once you meet your minimum, you're allowed to do something called tranching, where you can take the promised funds out and then while you're still raising. So we knew that was our backup of, okay, then we just have to meet the minimum before we start shooting. So there was a lot of stress around the holidays, which, you know, we were fundraising for a holiday movie, so that was probably an advantage being around that time. But I feel like our campaign picked up in January. Like the holidays were kind of quiet and we were very nervous that we were going to have to put a pause on the production and all of that, even though we had actor agreement, all this, you know, once you're a moving train and that gets people on board, but you're also every day we're checking the campaign and trying to do everything that we can to help it build. But what I was going to say is the one sort of gift is that we finished our campaign in, I believe it was April of 2020. And because we didn't know, we had an expectation of how much we would raise and we had some money saved that we were using and floating and, you know, all the things you shouldn't do. But we didn't know the final number. And so I think we were fairly conservative on our certain things. If we knew the final number, I think we probably would have splurged on a few things or spent it in different ways during production. And we wouldn't have had the incredible title sequence we have. We wouldn't have had this money in post. We wouldn't have had, you know, it was just like, there are so many expenses that come up toward the end that we definitely wouldn't have budgeted for. And even now it's still like, you're like, oh, I wish we still had more, but I know we wouldn't have had what we had if, we knew our final number before production.
So what was your minimum? And then when did you hit the minimum?
That's a great question. And I'm now trying to remember. It's such a fog. I want to say our minimum was like $75K, something like that, which, you know, we had done a number of different versions of the budget where we would, you know, what is literally the minimum. And I think that's how we had set the minimum, which I think was a little naive. It was a little lower than it should have been. But I think we reached it. We started production, I want to say January 17th. And maybe we met the minimum January 10th. You know, we had one large investor. Yeah, we had to, but you still have to wait 7 to 10 business days for it to go through.
Right. But you started shooting on like the 12th or something, or when was
the 17th? So we knew there was a period where we knew like, okay, you know, but yeah, it's that dance of, you know, telling everyone, yeah, we're ready. Everything's in place. Everything's good. And also like, we're running this campaign and like, is everything good? Is it going to happen? And we were talking to a few different investors who were very interested, but, you know, maybe hadn't, you know, made their investment yet. And you're like, maybe you should move a little quicker.
Yeah, I was in the same position as you. I basically raised I think I hit my minimum 2 weeks before we shot. And then I still had to raise more. It was like, okay, well, this is the bare minimum I need. And then I got more in that 2 week period. So I was like, still like collecting checks, like while we were shooting.
So you were actively fundraising while, like, I feel like we put it on pause a little bit in a way that I don't regret, because I think you have to make the movie. You know, I didn't want to be like every day on WeFunder posting updates or, you know, and I do think actually it was an advantage to be shooting because we could say, hey, we're a go movie. We're shooting. Look here, we're already in production. So that was appealing to some investors. But also the campaign, I wasn't as aggressive with the campaign during those, you know, weeks of shooting for good reason.
I can't remember the exact days of how it worked out, but like we finished our crowdfunding campaign. I think it was 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks before we shot. And then it was like trying to get the last few investments in from other investors. So like, because a crowdfunding campaign was only a small portion for us. And most of it came from equity investors outside of that,
Yeah,
which if I had done WeFunder like you guys, it would have all been connected, which would have been nice.
There was something very clean about that. But even with WeFunder, I know some filmmakers who've done it and do still have equity investors outside of WeFunder, which I think, there's ways to build that. And, I have not personally done that, but you could do it that way too. But it's also very nice that it's all in one place and all, under that paperwork.
I want to talk a little bit about, I know you said there isn't strategy, but there is strategy in the projects that you choose and the decisions that you make. And a holiday film is something that is a very commercial thing. Can you talk a little bit about casting and genre and what your expectations were for these things going in, like what the strategy was, and then what was the outcome?
Sure. That's a great question. There is strategy with a holiday film. I think that, and when we finished it, finished rep production, there was a big debate about whether we even wanted to apply to festivals because we are a comedy. We're a very commercial film. It's not the kind of thing that, every festival wants, and in fairness, festivals are trying to champion films sometimes that are more difficult that people won't see otherwise. Whereas a holiday film, feel good film is more likely to find an audience on its own. And so there was sort of this balancing act of, do we want to go that way? But going to your casting question, I think it gave me a little liberty in terms of, it's an ensemble cast and we have some fun cameos, some name actor cameos. But, going into it, I wanted to be able to audition as many actors as I could and really get to know them and work with them. And rather than necessarily strategize about having name talent attached. And I think maybe that's my background as an actor. I'm kind of like, I want to find the best person for the role. Not to say that there aren't name talent who would be incredible in the film, but I think there's also that sense of control of wanting to know what their performance is going to be like before the first day of set. Like that, I would imagine would be very scary with a lead actor who, maybe you've had a phone call with, but you can't audition them. You just offer them. And so I think knowing that the holiday genre, just like a horror film, is the genre is a star in a sense, gave me a little bit of freedom to cast the actors that I wanted and to kind of go through that casting process. So that was sort of my strategy. I don't know if that's the smartest strategy. I'm sure if we had some, huge name, that probably would help our film too. But I think it also could balloon the budget. There are different things, different sacrifices you make.
So you basically didn't ever try to get name talent in the movie. You were just like, no, thanks. Like, that's not what we want to do with this one. Or did you make an attempt?
I didn't make an attempt. I thought, because there were a few fun cameos where it's like, oh, it's a day, I'll ask, like those are the ones we could kind of ask somebody who's name talent or a little bit out of our reach and see if they'd be interested in coming in for a day or two. And we ended up getting some really great people in those roles. What was interesting and so, sort of a lesson to me actually was one of the people we did reach out to for a cameo role ended up, immediately said, can I read the script? We sent over the script. Within 2 hours, they wrote back, love the script, but I want to play the lead.
Right.
But which was a surprise to me because I thought, oh, this is nice. It's kind of like the crew thing of like, oh, you're working on weekends. Then it's nice. You can take a big money job and not feel bad spending all your time on our very low budget film. But sort of similarly, I was surprised that happened. And we had already cast that role. And, there was a moment where it was like, well, is this a mistake? Should I be rethinking and should I try to get? But also I was really happy with who I cast for that role and didn't want to, change. And I'm glad that I did, but it was a lesson in, oh, wait, I suppose I could have shot higher and tried to get a name talent for, I just thought commitment wise, they might not want to commit, especially because we were shooting sort of up to pilot season or right around pilot season. So I thought that might be a difficult time to get, name talent.
I've had that issue before too, where I've talked to an agent and I'd be like, we only need them 2 or 3 days. And the agent was like, I want my client to work more days. Do you not understand?
You're like, but do you know how little we're paying?
I know. It's like maybe we haven't got to the budget conversation yet. We talk a lot about process lately too. And I mean, this short that we just did, Chrissy, was genuinely one of the most creatively fulfilling experiences I've ever had. Like, maybe it was because it came out of a dearth of that in the pandemic and it was just overwhelming, but
that's not why.
It's because it was amazing. But you acted in this, you wrote, you directed, I'm sure you helped produce. I mean, what has been the most creatively fulfilling aspect of it?
Oh, it's hard to separate them. I just feel like I've been, and I think as a director, you're part of the process from start to finish. And so every element has been really creatively fulfilling. I think, post, I think by nature of, once again, to bring up COVID, but by nature of the pandemic, post got stretched out longer than it would have otherwise. And in a way, it was kind of wonderful. It was wonderful, especially at the beginning of all of it, where, we didn't know what was going on, how long all of this would last. To have something creative to work on was a real gift, but I think we also, I can micromanage. Sometimes I can get so, if you ask our editor, Andy Young, sometimes we would go through a scene. And I think this is also the sort of actor brain I really love, like kind of crafting each performance. And sometimes the way I would direct on set, we would do long takes and we'd get the whole scene, but then we'd do what Andy started to term line-oramas, because I would kind of stand next to the camera and they would have it. And then I'd just throw out different actions, different things, different ideas, and they would kind of go over the same part.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, is it adjustments or?
They're adjustments. I think it actually comes from, I guess I could have talked about this in my intro. Another thing that I do is I'm an acting coach. I've taught, that was my side gig when I graduated college. I started teaching kids acting and have done it freelance ever since. And it's been a really nice, fulfilling side gig. And I think also helped develop me as a director. But because of that, when you're going over with a student, a script they're auditioning for, oftentimes you'll take it line by line, try this. And often what some directing books have, like, use action words. So like, I want you to flirt here. I want you to challenge her here. I want you to, seduce her here. And, kind of playing with those different things or giving them maybe a different inner monologue thought or something. And so I wasn't so controlling that it'd be line by line, but, they would be kind of smaller chunks and I would, they would do a chunk and I would say, okay, let's do it again. But this time this, and sometimes vastly different things, which the fun for me is you get to the edit and you're really crafting the scene and you have a million directions you can go in. I think the actors actually genuinely liked it. Some actors, I think it could drive you nuts, but generally I think at least this group liked it. And I think probably the editor liked it as well, because you have all that latitude to play with. But having longer time in post was, a real game of crafting each. There are a few difficult scenes in that, in a classic rom-com sort of form. Sometimes the characters are difficult and unlikable, and you're sort of kind of wavering between how unlikable you can go. And so to have those takes where, like, I the character who I'm talking about mostly, Logan, he is the character who in many ways grows the most. He and Natalie are the ones who meet at the party the first year and they keep on meeting. And they have a lot of growth to do, both of them, but he especially behaves badly in a few instances. And so kind of in those scenes, we had some takes where he was awful. And then you're like, well, I find that really fascinating. An audience might not. And so, we at least could pull back and then had the takes where, like, oh, he might still be saying something awful, but he's at least a little charming when he does.
Yeah, that's funny. I remember talking to Matt about that because I had the same problem with my lead in my movie, that he just came off so negative a lot of the time. And like, it was really an editing challenge to figure out, okay, like what lines to take out, like what scenes to remove, like what pieces to just a little look to take out and replace with a different look. Or like have him do a line reading like slightly differently off screen, and it just kind of shaped him a little bit more. So he's just a little bit more likable, a little bit less detestable the whole time.
Well, and sometimes you're so close to your characters that you're like, I find it fascinating for him to be horrible. I don't know also if some of that's like bad rom-com programming, as like some of the ones I like as a child, when I rewatch, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be supporting this character, but I like him, even though he's horrible. It could be a little bit of that. But also I think, I'm attracted to characters who are difficult and problematic, but you can't lose an audience for it, and I think when you write it, you grow attached to the characters and know why they're behaving that way. But sometimes an audience doesn't have the patience to find out why they're behaving that way.
My last question, I know Arik probably has one more, of course, too, but I'm obsessed with chemistry in rom-coms. It is the entire reason why I watch rom-coms is the swoon moment when you're like, what's going to happen? I wanted to ask how you built that into the casting and the edit, or how that was integrated into the film.
Ooh, so many factors. So from the casting, sort of going chronologically in our process, casting, which we had an incredible casting director, Jane Flowers, she's the one who found AJ, because I did not know AJ at all. And actually she found all of our, it's funny because I know so many actors and had so many wonderful actor friends come in who were incredible, but just didn't quite fit any role. But almost all the actors were total strangers to me. But anyway, we did chemistry reads. So once we had narrowed it down to 4 or 5 of the Natalies and 4 or 5 of the Logans, we did an afternoon where we brought them in and mixed and matched and had them read with each other. So that was fun. But it's also so much pressure too, because that the weight of the film, like if there isn't chemistry, there's no film. Speaking of every part of the process being really hard and scary during that, it was like, oh, casting's the worst. But then, on set, right before we shot, we couldn't afford to do like a hosted table read where we had or any rehearsal process because that wasn't in our budget. But I had a sort of optional cast party. And because this is set at a party, it was like, oh, I wanted to get, most of the characters are supposed to have known each other before the first party of the movie. And so I wanted to get them in a room together, get to know each other and kind of build those relationships. Plus we needed some Polaroid stills to have in the background. And I was like, this will be a fun game. We'll take Polaroids. And I think it actually did help them in bonding. And we, had a game where we went around the circle and told a fun fact about ourselves and had sort of those sort of icebreaker things. And so I think over that, they, started to get to know each other, and I put them in contact. I don't know if I was like, you could meet up if you want, but you can't force anything. I don't know if they met up. But then also, I think the nature of the chronology of the film really helped, because as they got to know each other and become more comfortable with each other, I think they bonded in a way over the filming of it. And so it really mirrored that. And then you get to post and it's, picking takes. I think editing really, helps solidify that, but then also score. Andrew Scott Bell had done our score and just did, so he, when I met with him, because I met with a number of composers, he had a theme that he was kind of thinking of. And like that theme we expanded on and we play throughout the film. And I feel like that theme really helps pay off that chemistry and create it,
So I want to talk about distribution, and like I'm in the middle of it right now for my movie. So
you should talk to Liz. She knows a lot about distribution.
We've been talking about it, but I want to know like what your strategy was and like why you ended up with Giant out of all the other choices that you could have had out there.
Yeah. Liz is laughing. Well, a few things. Like I said, we knew that this would be a commercial film. And we knew that there would be a market because it's a holiday film, but we also knew that we weren't like a Hallmark Lifetime film, like we're not to say that we're like incredibly raunchy or racy in any way, but we're just a click above, I think, for those audiences and a little, indie. We weren't setting out to make a Hallmark film. It's and no disrespect to Hallmark, but knowing that, then we started talking to producers reps. Partially because none of us had any experience between me, B, and Matt with distribution with any of our projects. I mean, Matt's web series, the Squaresville, the one that the 3 of us had worked on, that got distribution, but it's also, new media. It was a different world 10 years ago when that got distributed. It's different players, so we knew that we didn't have the skill set. And so we started talking to a few different producers reps. And then when we moved forward with one, he, came up with a list of here are the different places that I think, might like your film. We're going to start with this list. And then if we don't get any bites, we'll move to the next, we'll do another list, probably like 20, 25 places were on that list. And we did get a few bites, a few people who wanted to talk. And then, from there, what was really fascinating to me, I kind of went in thinking that our conversations would purely be, do they get the film? Are they really going to champion the film? What do I know about those companies? Do I like them? Which all, of course, are important. But the sort of surprise being a holiday film is that the 2 companies we had narrowed it down to had vastly different distribution models for how to distribute our film. One wanted to do, because you do TVOD to SVOD to AVOD, they wanted to start it in August and TVOD so that we could end up on a subscriptional platform by this Christmas. But I also, hesitated because we didn't end up going with this company. But, as a holiday film releasing in August, I didn't think the TVOD window would do anything. And so we'd be kind of placing this gamble, hoping we get SVOD, but also after a sort of unsuccessful TVOD window, versus Giant was really excited about the idea of having sort of a library film where they could release TVOD this year. We're doing SVOD next year. They're pitching it now. Then the following year, AVOD, and kind of keep bringing it back and pitching it and really making the most of each window. And so I was really excited about that. And then also on top of that, Giant, is really artist friendly. Their deal was just better, in so many ways, and just felt like the right fit. So I was really happy when we had a conversation with them and could keep having conversations with them and then seal the deal with them.
Well, I think it is time to move to the final 5 questions. Chrissy, what's the first film you ever made and how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, I mean, does that count film school films? Like that's the first film you ever made?
Whatever you want it to be.
Well, I'm thinking of if you went to USC, you know what 290 is. I can't remember what
507
is for. Okay, 507, where you have to make 5 short films in the semester. Every 3 weeks, you're 1 week shoot, 1 week edit. Oh no, 1 week write, 1 week shoot, 1 week edit, turnover. And so that's what came to my mind. I made a film called A Walk in the Park. And it had, the first one, the assignment was it had to be an in-camera edit. So you had to shoot everything chronologically and only do the take. And if you had to rewind over to do another take, it starred my sister and Matt Enlow, both. Where basically, like, I think she trips in a park and he like tries to help, like she drops something and she thinks he's like going to murder her. And so she runs. And finally, there's like a little romantic sweet scene at the end of like, oh, here's your phone or whatever she dropped. Yeah. My cousins watched it, who were at the time were like 3 or 4 and loved it. Biggest fans. They just wanted to watch it on repeat because they knew the actors.
What's the best filmmaking advice you've ever received?
To just do the smallest next step. That when you're looking up at the mountain, it's too much. You realize all the things that have to happen to make a movie, and it can be overwhelming. But think of the smallest task you can do. It might just be sending an email to someone saying, I don't know how to do this, but that's a task and that's going to move you forward. So just taking very small steps and just even challenging yourself to find the literal smallest thing. Like, this is so tiny. It's not even a task. I shouldn't feel good about it, but you should feel good because you move forward.
Do you have a goal as a filmmaker, like a certain goalpost that you're trying to hit?
Not specific. I mean, if you asked me as a child, I'd say the red carpet at the Oscars, but I think, as one matures and realizes there's more to filmmaking than because as a child, you just see the award show. Like, that's how you see the culmination of success. Somebody handed you an award, so it's good. But I think, if I can have a lifetime of making things that excite me and hopefully that connect with somebody somewhere and can make a living doing that, and then I've succeeded.
If you go back in time, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I think start shooting earlier, not wait for permission.
Is making movies hard?
Yes, but also very rewarding. Anything in life that is hard, not everything in life, but I think anything that's rewarding probably is hard. Let's put it the other way, not...
Ark, I was pessimistic and didn't think we would have enough time. Do you want to add another question?
Did I not talk long enough with all those questions?
That's like how it should be, but it never goes that way.
It always takes like 20 minutes and I get very nervous about it.
So the question was, you're an actor. That's like the thing that you do to pay the bills. Now you've directed this film. Do you feel like going forward, are you going to put more energy into like the directing camp, or are you just going to do it? So the next time I have this great project I want to make, I'll be a director and keep on acting, or has it not changed at all since you directed the feature?
I don't think it's changed at all. I think, there's something so fulfilling about, the gift of being an actor is you're getting to play in somebody else's playground. Like, somebody else has a vision that's outside anything you could have imagined, and you get to step into that. But then there's also something really fulfilling about having your own idea and being the captain of the ship and steering that ship. But I think it's so exhausting. Like, I think that sort of balance of maintaining both and also sort of to speak of control and just going out and making things and waiting for permission. As an actor, in a lot of ways, you have to wait for permission. I mean, you have to wait for somebody to write a role that you're right for, to get the opportunity to audition or even be considered for it. Like that, even that jump is huge, let alone being the one person they pick for it. And so there's a lot that's outside your control. Whereas having a project as a director, sure, there's like all these obstacles that stand in your way, but you can steer the ship, you can take that next step and make it happen. And so I think sort of the balance of, I would never want to sort of pick one and not do the other. I think they both inform my work and are two. I couldn't pick.
I'm glad you asked that question, Ulrich.
Yeah,
I am too. That's a good question.
Go. You do it. No, you do it. You do it.
I said it's the last question. You do it.
Sell your wares, Chrissy. Tell us how people can support you and see you next Christmas.
Well, if you look up See You Next Christmas movie, Instagram is where we post the most. But if it's before November 9th, when you are listening, you can pre-order our film on iTunes. Pre-orders really help filmmakers. I don't think I fully understood that until I've been in this seat, that if you deliver strong on pre-orders, your placement will be better. People will find out about your film. So pre-order it if this is before November 9th. And if not, just order it, watch it. That's the best way to help support it. You can find me, Christine Weatherup, on basically ChristineWeatherup.com, Christine Weatherup, Instagram, Twitter at C Weatherup because my name's too long. But, basically, if you look up Christine Weatherup, you will find me, ChristineWeatherup@gmail. If you want to email me, I answer emails. And See You Next Christmas movie is what it's under for things. We're working on the Facebook page and website to make those more robust. But Instagram, you'll get all the updates.
Thank you for being on the show. We did it.
Amazing.
We did it.
Ulrich, what do you remember about our conversation with Chrissy?
I remember just thinking like how organized she was and how like kind of clear-minded she was about her career. Like I was kind of expecting more of this, like, cause she's an actor is like her main thing. And that like, actor turned director writer. So I kind of expected like, oh, I found this through acting, but it sounded like she had always thought of herself as a writer director or a filmmaker as well as an actor, which I thought was interesting. And that like kind of it's just funny how the main thing that you do kind of takes you over as a person, and then like kind of you just think of that person as, oh, they're an actor because that's the thing they do the most, but she's actually much more than that. The other thing I thought was interesting was that they used WeFunder.
WeFunder, yeah.
I know Matt had been talking my ear off about it and kind of encouraging me to look into WeFunder when they were doing it. And I was like, WeFunder, who wants WeFunder? I'm going to just do the thing I know, go with Seed and Spark. But it's like a completely different way of raising money than traditional crowdfunding. Because it's like equity crowdfunding. So It seems like a really interesting thing that I was happy to hear more about. But yeah, Liz, what about you? What stuck out in the conversation?
I wouldn't say I've been haunted, but there's like what's another word for a ghost? There's been a spirit hanging over my shoulder, making me feel slightly regretful over one of the questions I asked Chrissy. Because for everyone who doesn't know, Chrissy was the lead in my first feature. And so I think of her in a very protective way. And I think of her in a very specific way. She's my Amelia Karinsky in Bread and Butter. She's like that person to me. And I asked a question I said something like, when I first met you, I thought you were an actress. And then I find out you're a writer and a director. And I had these presumptions about her relationship with her husband and that she was the muse and he was the director. Oh, yeah. And I realized like only after the fact, like how weirdly patronizing that was to her. Like, you're just this actress muse for your husband. So I've been haunted by that for the past few days, just feeling really regretful that that's how I phrased the question, because Chrissy's so much more than just one thing. Just like you're saying, you have this presumption, or I have this presumption about actors, but she is a storyteller and she's great. So I thought the conversation was wonderful. I just feel bad about that one exchange.
I want to defend you a little bit because I just basically said I had the same presumption. I just didn't say it, but you said it. And I think when I was hearing you say that, I was like, oh, interesting. I want to hear the answer to this question. And then that's what was the surprising thing was that it wasn't that relationship. It wasn't like, oh, right. He's the filmmaker and, oh, I'm an actor. And then like, she learns about the filmmaking from the filmmaker that she's dating or now married to. Right. It's like, that's what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. It was completely different, which I think was really interesting. And I don't even remember if you were part of this interview. This was so long ago. But we had another actor on the show who was an actor turned writer. And she had like was writing some big stuff on some big thing or whatever. And like, I had just assumed that she was like, just found the way to writing through acting. But it was like, no, writing was the first thing. Acting was the second thing. But that was just what she was like well known for, because that's what she got jobs doing. So it was just really interesting to hear how these things go. She had no writing credits because she'd been writing the whole time, but nothing had ever been produced.
Right.
Like
so it's hard to like deduce that when we do our research on people who come in the show. I also think like the reason I asked the question is because that's the scenario I've always wanted. Like, I want, Sean is my husband, and he went to film school to be a writer, actor, director. His heroes are like Clint Eastwood, right? So what I want is I want Sean to be the actor in my movies, and I get to write and direct them, and we get to have this like cool power couple thing. But Sean always ruins it because he likes to write and he likes to direct too. And I made this presumption that Chrissy and Matt had this like idyllic relationship that I had always wanted, where you have a muse and you have the person who gets inspired by the muse.
I'm still like not shocked, but like impressed that Matt decided to produce, her feature, with her, because like, that's like something that not a lot of directors would be willing to do. And the question I regret not asking was, would she return the favor for him? Ooh. Will she produce his next feature?
Or first feature.
Curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. His first feature. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Just putting it out there. Maybe if they're listening, Matt, you can answer. Like, will Chrissy do it? Because I know Matt listens. I don't know if Chrissy listens to the show, but I know Matt does. So
I think Chrissy will listen to this episode.
Yeah. Let's find out. Write in. We want to know. But yeah, I think without further delay, it's time to talk about the tragedy in New Mexico on the set of Rust, which, Liz and I both talked about, that we're like following obsessively to just learn more information. Cause I think it's like, you want to know how this can possibly happen and how you could avoid anything even close to this happening on your set. And then as you're reading it, you're like, what? What is happening here? Why would any of these things ever happen? And it just is the worst possible amount of information that you're just reading, and new things are uncovered. It's all, I almost don't believe it. The latest thing about this plinking happening, where they're like, we're practicing shooting the prop gun with real bullets in between scenes right off set. Like, how could that happen? That's insane to me. But Liz, do we want to like kind of recap what's going on, or like how do we want to talk about this thing?
I mean, I have the same question in my mind, because anyone who's listening to this show will have known that there was a death on the set of Rust, that the cinematographer, Helena Hutchins, was killed, that the director was shot, but the bullet went through her, or whatever it was, the live round went through her and to the director, right? And I agree, every single day you have new details. So by the time this show airs, we're going to be woefully uninformed. So, disclaimer to everyone. But yes, we just heard about the plinking. What I wanted to mention, in lieu of answering your question of how to do this, I reached out to a friend of mine who is colleagues with the camera operator on the set of Rust. And our mutual friend told me before the plinking details came out, the same information, that they went hunting. She said that they went hunting the night before. The news is saying it was earlier that morning that they did this plinking. They didn't unload the gun, and they didn't have a safety meeting. This was before all this information came out, is that, she told me about that they were rehearsing an insert, like all the details came through my mutual friend before they were in the news. So I feel it's like somewhat reputed. So many things had to go wrong, right? And did go wrong. It's just very upsetting. I guess that what I want to make sure I say is just how abominably sad this is, and how upsetting it is that it really, when I heard about it, I immediately was like, this could have been any of us. This could have been any one of our friends. This could have been any one of our chosen family. Completely avoidable and democratic in how it happened, in that like any of us could have been on a set and we could have been shot by an errant live round, right?
Yeah. It shouldn't be a case where someone can die on a film set.
Yeah.
But the thing I've been thinking about is that like you can die for lots of other reasons on film sets that aren't even weapon related or gun related. Like we're working with really like dangerous equipment, like generators are very dangerous. Lights are very dangerous. These heavy stands are super dangerous. Vehicles are dangerous. I don't know about you, but every AD I've ever worked with is like obsessed with safety.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the best way to do it. Like you should be having that kind of seriousness with every day on set. So like when you read about the Rust production crews saying like, oh, we had 3 safety meetings before this, It's like you had 3. We have them every day. The start of every day of a set, you have a safety meeting during the morning meeting to go over all the possible things. Like we talk about the safety of like walking over cords that are on the ground, like tripping on cables. Like that's part of the daily set protocol. So like to hear they only had 3 safety meetings, you're like, well, we every day we had a stunt. We'd have the safety meeting in the morning, and then we'd have another safety meeting before we did the stunt. So I don't understand how this could possibly happen with professional crew that have worked on many, many movies. It just seems mind blowing to me.
No, it's crazy. And I think that also is because I've been, trolling the interweb for comments and reading all the articles. And there'll be people who are calling for the end of real guns on set. Mm-hmm. And then the counter argument is always like, the guns are not the most dangerous things, are not the only incredibly dangerous things on the set. And everything has to be treated with a degree of decorum and protocol that it wasn't treated with on this set. Yeah, it makes you very, very angry. And, I've certainly been trying to work my way around what is the source and what was the problem and who's to blame. And I think that is not the healthiest way to look at it, right? It's not about finger pointing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, that's what's happening. Like professionals are doing that, right? That's what the detectives are for. That's what the trial's for, to figure out who's at fault, But I just think banning guns is, prop guns that have blanks in them is obviously not the solution, because it doesn't even sound like it was a blank that did the deed in the end, that it was like a real bullet that should never have been in there. So it just comes back to like these protocols that we have in place and taking safety very seriously and like running a professional set and like not cutting corners. Like that's one of the first things I read was like, oh, they were cutting corners. They were moving so fast. It's like, that's the kind of thing that we need to watch out for. And I immediately thought about like when I've cut corners on sets or have been on sets where we were cutting corners and like just thinking, oh my gosh, like so thankful that nothing bad happened. But it just makes me think back to like our conversations that we've been having the last few months about crew safety. Like, your whole incubator was basically designed to avoid issues like this by like, treating crew better, like having more like working hours that make sense, like kind of rethinking everything that we do. Cause you said like it's broken, like the film production system is broken. And this is like evidence of that, I think, right?
100%. And right before we shot our short film 2 weeks ago, I had this nightmare. This was obviously before the horrific tragedy in New Mexico. I had this nightmare that my AD did not have a safety meeting and the entire crew rioted because he didn't have a safety meeting. Like that, for some reason, and our film had no stunts, our film had nothing, but it was like, even before this happened, that was like a very scary thought that you wouldn't have a safety meeting on a set. Like so much so that it like infiltrated my psychosis before we shot something. So it's just something that is ever present. It's not something that should be thought of as a box to check. It should be something to be considered a real concern when you're making a movie. And it also just makes indie film look so irresponsible because the things that happen in the spotlight are only negative things in indie film. They don't go like, this set was really well run. We're going to talk about it on Fox and Friends today. Right. We're only talking about just like the pitfalls and major tragedies and mistakes. And it really just makes indie filmmakers look like careless idiots. Yeah. Careless idiot murderers.
Yeah. My thoughts are with, Helena's family. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
But to something a little bit lighter, we finally have time to answer a listener question from one of our regular listeners, Amon Eels. Liz, do you want to do the honors of reading this question?
Sure. Amon writes, thanks, guys. I think we said thank you to Eamon. And he said, thanks, guys. You may have given me luck because I managed to win a screenplay and semi-finalist in another festival. What the heck do I do now? I'm hardly going to make them because that's too hard. Did you see what I did there? You have both been very generous, giving me shout outs I don't deserve, but I still get a thrill out of annoying the family on long car journeys with it. Anyway, want a question, huh? What's the most painful thing you have never written about? Is there a movie in it? Yeah, I know you wanted what lens would you use when doing a porno scene with a drug lord? Or what's the best mid-morning snack when the crew has allergies? Too bad. To be fair, you may not want to air your answers. I'm at heart an armchair therapist, but if not, I would accept the yes or no of whether there was some kernel of Hollywood greatness in it. I may have run into a cliche after working in the emergency department, I think in ED. This never happened, but I did have a guy who had a carrot stuck somewhere in not to be. At the same time, I've not been at this long enough to run into the same thing twice. So if I bumped into a cliche, I would be happy, as it would mean I'm starting to understand how things work. Love, Eamon. I want to recognize that it is always better to read Eamon's letters for yourself instead of hearing them read out loud. They're just like way better. The jokes aren't going to be as funny unless you're reading it. So, Ulrich, what is the most painful thing you have never written about? Is there a movie in it?
Yeah, so I actually tried to write about it, but I haven't really been successful. But when I was a production assistant, I got fired off a big budget Apple commercial because I basically was accused of losing the AD's keys to his vehicle. Although I don't know if I necessarily did it, but it was my own fault because when they asked who had them last, I was like, I think I might have, when it might not even been true. I was just trying to be like the responsible one. And then, I was like I spent all at the rest of the day and into the night, like looking through this grass field in Petaluma, trying to find these keys that may have fallen out of my pocket. Yeah. Then I was asked to come back the next day to look, more with him. And I couldn't because I was like on a trip with my, at the time, girlfriend. And then I got fired over the phone. And I was so embarrassed about it. And so like, I'll never work again. This is the end of my life, in my career. And I always wanted to write it into a movie, and I tried and I failed. But one day I will, because it was such a traumatic thing for me. And then, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, no one's going to know about it. And I was on set like a week later and someone brought it up who I did not tell about it, who wasn't on the show. And it was another PA who mentioned it. It's like, oh, sorry to hear about that thing with this company. And I was like, oh my God. And then I heard about it like a year later from somebody else. So it's like, it definitely affected my career to some degree. I don't know. But anyways, I'm here now, so it's all good. But what about you, Liz? Is there something that you've never written about that's painful?
Mine is very different. I wrote about a heartbreak that I had. Speed of Life is about a bad relationship that I had. And I always couch it in this David Bowie thing and whatever. But at its core, it's actually about a broken heart. And that's my answer to the question, because I wrote about it without writing about it. Like I wrote about it, but I disguised it in like 15 different layers of things, so that it's actually the reason why it's such a hard time answering actor questions on set. Because they'd be like, why do I do this? And I'd be like, well, because he broke my heart in that way. Like, what am I going to say? And it's this heartbreak that still haunts me, that I exercise a lot of it into Speed of Life. But it is kind of the most painful thing that I've never written about, because I did it through like the most cryptic way possible.
Yeah, you probably left out some of the most tough parts too, right?
Yeah.
That always happens. Maybe later we'll both write about our things. Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, we also have to thank, can't remember if we thanked Eamon for being a Patreon supporter, but if we did, we'll thank you again. Thank you so much, Eamon, for that. And we also have to thank Nigel Gould Davies and Ed Jones Edward for also becoming Patreon supporters.
Wait, Ulrich. Happy birthday, Nigel Gould Davies, and happy birthday, Edward Jones Edward.
Yes.
Is your name really Ed Jones Edward? Because that is just like the world's best name if it is. And the reason we're saying happy birthday to you is it's our weird little special way of thanking Patreon supporters, right? It's like, you're not just a Patreon, it's like your special day. We want to celebrate you. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And I also wanted to point out that Nigel and Ed, and I think Eamon too, are all UK listeners. So we're getting love from the other side of the pond here, which is incredible. So thank you so much for that. And also, if you want to be like Eamon and ask us a question, or you can send us a question, just like Eamon, or a comment or suggestion to podcast@makingmoviesishard.com. Or if you really like the show, you can leave us a review on iTunes. We haven't gotten one of those in a long time. Wonder why, but maybe we'll get one soon. And finally, you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at MMIH Podcast, and YouTube at Making Movies is Hard Podcast. Thanks to Christine for coming on the show, and to Karen Oberon from KOPR for reminding us to reach out to Chrissy, because I saw that email from KOPR and I was like, oh man, this is our next episode, and we made it happen. Thanks to our new editor, Jeff Vrymoot, for doing the editing. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week.